Hi everybody, my name's Megan. I'm kind of doing this to try to bridge the gap between what a lot of people think is going on with the Our Flag Means Death Season 2 finale and what some of the actual complaints are. I just want to try to get people on the same page. Obviously, this is going to contain spoilers for Season 2. A lot of people aren't really seeing past what the major complaint is of Izzy dying, and of the idea that they think is, oh, you're mad because your fave isn't on the cast anymore. They're not going to be in the show anymore. I'm trying to get people to get a new perspective, and for that reason I'd really like to encourage people to share this video and make a video yourself if you have something to say back or you have something to add. I do want to start with some trigger warnings. This is going to talk about suicide, violence, disabilities, and ableism. Some people do put an element of like domestic abuse in this. I'm not really going to talk about that. It's not something I have anything to say about on for this situation. I want to give some background on myself. My name is Megan. I'm 27 years old and part of the queer community. Probably demi and non-binary. I'm disabled. I'm not specifically an amputee, which this does touch on, so just to let you know that. But I have dealt with, I've worked with people who are, and I live with suicidal ideations, still current, honestly. It's a thing that doesn't necessarily go away. So, like, background, Our Flag Means Death was, relatively unheard of, and we all kind of know it was built by the queer community. And it wasn't just one queer couple or a couple of, usually specifically just homosexual people that are often white and cisgender. We had amazing diversity in cast, characters, all that stuff. And immediately, right off the bat, one of the characters that people really identified with was Izzy. He was kind of this beast of burden character, which made a lot of people identify with him. He was kind of the straight man in the group of like a really, funny cast. This is a rom-com. He had a lot of nuance. People identified with his codependency with Ed, stuff like that. And like an immediate red flag, in my opinion, was that he was kind of part of a love triangle, or he was a ship splitter. And that immediately sets off alarms in my head for people looking for any reason to deny him as a character, any reason to hate him, to make themselves feel justified in not liking that person that splits up their ship. And when Izzy, has this identity, he's kind of on par with the rest of the cast for how marginalized he is. He is a more elderly queer person than we see in a lot of media, but otherwise a lot of the stuff that we see him kind of getting labeled as is headcanon at this point. A lot of people headcanon him as trans. Some people headcanon him as autistic, and we have multiple characters that people headcanon as trans or autistic, but no concrete proof so far except for really Jim as a non-binary identity. But that means that when he grows, he kind of grows with the whole cast. They all kind of get their growth at the same time and everything. So then when the season ends, there's tons of expression from fans before there is ever a renewal for season 2. And the writers of this show are so responsive and obviously are really taking things into consideration. They're interactive, so are the actors and everything. They see what people are saying. and they see a lot of the headcanons, and they even talk about a lot of the headcanons and stuff. The cast and the crew and everything are highly interactive with this show. They know a lot of what's going on. They don't owe anybody any fulfillment of what they see, but they're aware of what their target demographic is. Like I said, the queer community made this show. So then season 2 comes along, and immediately off the bat, Izzy has violence committed against him multiple times. Whether or not you, whatever you feel the level of culpability Izzy has, and I have my opinions about what Izzy's level of culpability in this was, he still responds in a way that is, it's not just for himself. He cares for Ed, and he directly tells him that. He tells Ed he loves him, and he cares for the crew. He tries to look out for them. He's overall pretty reasonable, especially compared to what he was in season 1. And then comes the part, Izzy has his leg cut off because Ed shoots him. And what comes next is what a lot of people have described as a suicide attempt. Now, I only say that in that wording because I didn't think it was at first. I, for some reason, had it in my head that Izzy fired the shot to get Ed to think that it happened, to throw him off or something. But the more I think about it, the less it makes sense is that way, because there's no way Izzy could have known what Ed was doing next. Ed was fully unhinged. It wasn't really predictable. So it really only makes sense to me that Izzy did in fact try to commit suicide, which is very obviously a deep, deep topic to get into, and something that a lot of people identify with, especially in the queer community. And I don't think there had been any lack of people talking about Izzy's mental health and Izzy's potential for suicidal ideations in between the seasons, before the writers kind of clammed up on things. And yet, the suicide attempt does not work. And Izzy, with no leg, hauls himself up and protects the crew. And he takes Ed down at a time when Ed is also suicidal. And then with his leg removed, Izzy kind of puts on this new marginalized identity on top of what he already has. And like I said, everybody in the crew is a marginalized identity. But here's where it really becomes important that Izzy really takes on some new identities. He finds that the crew empathizes with him, probably more than it's ever really implied that he thought that they would. As an audience, we certainly don't think that Izzy will ever have people connecting with him the way that they start to in season 2. They care about his pain, really, despite all of his faults. He needs that help to start healing from the things that have happened to him, and to come more into his identity as a disabled person. He flourishes in these identities, he's finding his place, both as a disabled pirate, which is, an extremely hard thing to do, and just as a disabled person who has support and stuff, which, if you've ever dealt with something like that, you probably know that you're not always on stable ground with your support system. It can be trying to try to understand where your support system comes in, what are boundaries, things like that. So to show him finding that is very important, especially as, a new thing versus an established thing. They weren't really friends. They really show him coming straight off of his disability into a very new situation of having support. And as a suicidal person, it's rarely just a one and done thing. If you have suicidal ideations, and especially after you've made an attempt, chances are it doesn't just go away, right after you fail the attempt. So he's probably still dealing with that through a lot of the season. And that is very crucial to what we have to say about the ending. Some of the growth, you can argue that it's on the nose. I personally think some of it is. Yeah, it was, but it was done. We got it. We were happy about it. And, it was so much more than we ever imagined. And it was so important for people to see that growth, because he now has the identity that a lot of people in this group do, in an already very marginalized group. And you're coming to these cross sections, you're having these people that have never had representation before. And none of it plays out as like a coming to an end. It's really a growth. And it's certainly no implication that he doesn't want to live. And that's where a lot of the anger is coming from. So in the end of the episode, for this to be really extremely quickly, like last 5 minutes, to have this ending, it kind of feels like, a slap in the face for a lot of us, because, we are people that have never had any kind of representation, and to have somebody who, admittedly, we don't know the disability status of all of the writers, or even necessarily the main and most central writers, David Jenkins, Alex Sherman, Taika Waititi. I know I didn't pronounce that right. Stuff like that. Disability isn't always visible. Obviously, suicidal ideations are not visible, but they knew it was a very deep thing for a lot of people watching this show. They knew it was very heavy material, and it just got handled really poorly, a lot of us think, because we're so marginalized. We see so little of ourselves, that to have an ending that is so needless, careless, kind of just shoehorned in at the last minute is really painful. A lot of people are saying that it's not fair to say that your growth doesn't mean anything because of dying. Like, hey, we're all gonna die. Your growth still means stuff even if you die. Like, yeah, we're well aware. Disabled people are aware they're gonna die, and a lot of us are gonna die a lot sooner than non-disabled people. And obviously, people with suicidal ideations are at high risk of dying a lot sooner than people who have never felt suicidal before, or people who have now dealt with their suicidal ideations and don't feel them anymore. We're aware, trust me. The thing is that, we don't see the happy endings. Just like it used to be bury your gays, and now the overall queer community is getting more and more stories where they get happy endings, and where they get nuance, and where they get their emotional fulfillment. And it's kind of a fuck you got mine thing, that they immediately forget that there are still some people that are more marginalized than them and don't see their stories as much. And they forget the feeling that they used to have of not knowing whether they had a good ending to their story. We don't get a lot of disability stories from start to finish. Not that there's really a finish necessarily for disability, chronic illness, stuff like that. It really bears the question of, why did we build up all of that just for something really meaningless? And you can't even, it's really hard to say that Izzy died for something, because he didn't die defending anyone. He didn't really further Ed and Steve's relationship any, because what he said during his final moments with Ed was a lie. The crew barely tolerated Ed for most of the season. They did it because they cared about Steve. They didn't even stay with the crew, so what's there to do with family? Their Ed and Steve's ending just really isn't that emotionally fulfilling either. So yeah, that's kind of the basis of what, and also, it's a huge thing of Izzy saying that he wants to go. Like, oh my God, could you really think of anything worse to portray a character who attempted suicide saying, like, yeah, he did have some growth and he did have some happiness, but he could have gone on so much longer with so much more. And it almost comes off as like saying to people who are suicidal or people who become disabled that, like, you should be happy with what you get. Like, you got this, you got some happiness. Don't you think you should be happy with it? Don't you think you should be ready now? Like, no, not even a little bit. Like, it's insane to me that they would try to build Izzy up as a living person and then say he's ready to die. Yeah, he still had some difficulties. He was still drinking. He, like, had a long life, but it's okay. It's okay that he had a long life. It's okay that he hurt because he found something. And it was about belonging to something, but apparently not if you're a convenient plot device. And it's really convenient that that plot device also happened to be the person that they gave the disability to, and that they, was an older queer person and never technically had an on-screen romance, except for, what was really considered an unrequited love with Ed. And what we did find out about Ed and Izzy, we never really got into. And we never really got into much emotional catharsis at all with Ed and Izzy. So yeah, it sucks. So no matter what your opinion of the writing is, and then at the end with Izzy's burial, there's a lot of wiggle room for what Izzy might consider a proper burial, being at sea versus at the place where Ed and Steed are, because hopefully it's very obvious to everyone that Izzy cared for Steed as well by the end of the season, whether you think that's romantically or just platonically. And he did confess his love for Ed, and Ed said he loved him too. So whether or not you think that he would want to be buried at sea or whether he would want to be in the place where Ed is, it was difficult for a lot of people to watch Izzy's prosthesis become, something that's publicly displayed. Some people have, openly said, hey, that's not a thing that amputees like to see. That there's a lot of trauma surrounding, possibly having to give artificial limbs and prosthesis back to insurance companies and things like that. Like, really and honestly, there was already an established best practice for this, and they didn't ask anyone about it. And also Izzy's, cravat and ring, where we very specifically had Khan say that there was an emotional attachment for him to Izzy's ring, for it to be left out as well. And that is my, thing that I've been telling people they should have brought in a sensitivity reader for. Just the display of a disabled person's prosthesis. And really, for the whole show, they really should have maybe had some sensitivity readers and stuff. Because they put on these marginalized identities, which so many of us are, without, necessarily knowing anything about them, and then they take the happiness that they gave these marginalized identities and they kind of really don't show it the due diligence that it was owed. So yeah, I think that kind of covers a lot of what people had issue with. It is absolutely not an exhaustive list, and I would love to hear more about what people think. But, it's not just that Izzy was our character and that Izzy is gone now. A lot of people have said that there are ways that they would have respected them killing Izzy, and there were ways that Izzy could have been gone without being dead. Just, they took on some themes that have a lot to do with death and have a lot to do with quality of life, and then they did not think about what Izzy's death might do, or what the respect that they paid to Izzy's life might do to people who he represented. So that's kind of the list, I think. I know I'll think of 10 more things as soon as I end this, but yeah, I'd really like to hear from people about what they think and everything, and hopefully we can kind of just get a little bit closer as fandom and as people to just seeing where each other comes from, and not discounting each other's opinions. Thank you so much, guys, and like really take care of yourself, and for the love of fucking God, be kind to Con O'Neill, because he did so well. It was so good, and I can't imagine what this is like for him right now, considering a lot of the stuff that he went through in this fandom, and I really hope that the place he found with us is someplace he never leaves, and that we gave him a safety and a feeling of community that he never feels like was wasted. We just want the best for him. Have a good night, guys.